Sofia Ferretti heard the sound before she understood it, a low, broken breath behind the closed bedroom door at the end of the eastern hall. The Mancini estate was asleep around her, all marble, black glass, and dim gold chandeliers. She had come home early because rain had ruined the road to Milan, and because she had wanted, foolishly, to surprise the man she was going to marry. In her hand, the paper bag from the pastry shop near the station had gone soft from the weather. The cream inside would be melting now. She stood with her coat still damp on her shoulders and listened to another sound, softer, unmistakable, a woman's pleased little laugh. She knew that laugh. She had grown up hearing it through walls, at tables, behind compliments sharp enough to cut. Her fingers closed around the brass handle. She did not throw the door open. She pushed it 3 inches, just enough for the line of light to touch her face. She saw the edge of the bed, the dark spill of hair against Luca's white sheets, her sister's bare shoulder, and Chiara's mouth curved with triumph, as if she had waited years for Sofia to arrive at exactly that moment. Chiara saw her. That was the worst part. Chiara saw her and did not look ashamed. Sofia made no sound. She closed the door so gently it might have been an act of love. Then she walked down the hall with the paper bag still in her hand. In the room that had been hers before it became theirs, she took her passport from the inner pocket of a winter coat and the cash from the carved wooden box hidden behind folded scarves in the back of her wardrobe. She had always kept emergency money because she had grown up watching her mother need it and not have enough. She packed one sweater, a photograph of her grandfather, and the small silver cross she did not believe in, but could not leave behind. At 11:47 p.m., Sofia Ferretti walked out of the Mancini estate through the kitchen door, past the sleeping guard who had never imagined she would be the one escaping. She left her engagement ring on the kitchen counter beside the untouched pastries. She did not look back. If she had, she might have broken. So she kept walking until the iron gates opened and the rain swallowed her whole. Before I continue, I'd like to make an announcement. I'll be sharing some really steamy, uncensored stories on my Patreon page that I couldn't post on YouTube. You can find the details in the description. Warning, the content is really steamy. Luca Mancini woke before dawn because the bed was wrong. His body knew danger before his mind gave it language. A cooled pillow, linen too still, a silence where Sofia's breathing should have been. He opened his eyes to grey morning pressing against the curtains and reached across the mattress. His palm met cold sheets. For several seconds he did not move. The side of his neck tightened where Italian script had been inked beneath his jaw. Sangue chiama sangue, blood calls to blood. He had worn those words as a vow to family and debt. That morning they felt like an accusation. He sat up, dark hair falling into his eyes, and said her name once. There was no answer. He moved through the suite barefoot, shirt still open from the night before, memory returning in poisoned pieces. Chiara arriving with wine after the meeting with the Calabrians. His cracked ribs burning under the pain medication he had refused to let slow him. Chiara crying, leaning close, saying Sofia did not understand his world, saying she did. Luca remembered pushing her away. He remembered the room tilting. After that, nothing clean enough to trust. In the dressing room, most of Sofia's things were untouched. That was what frightened him. A woman packing for a journey made choices. A woman running took only what kept her alive. He saw the missing coat, the empty square behind the scarves where something had been hidden, and his breath changed. By the time he reached the kitchen, 3 guards were awake, and 2 maids stood pale near the pantry. Dante, his right-hand man, arrived from the West Wing with his jacket half-buttoned and his expression already hardened for disaster. Luca found the ring first. It lay on the counter like a small circle of judgment. Beside it, the paper bag had collapsed into sugar, cream, and rain. Dante stopped in the doorway. He said nothing. Dante always had something to say. That silence told Luca more than any alarm. "Find her," Luca ordered. "I will," Dante said. "No." Luca looked up, and the kitchen seemed to lose warmth. "Find out who let her leave. Find out who followed her. Find out who knew." Within hours, every phone, gate log, and camera had been checked. Luca watched the security footage until the image carved itself into him. Sofia at the service door, a dark coat, a bag over one shoulder, her hair pinned hastily at the back of her neck. The guard rising, smiling, opening the gate because Sofia had always made people believe gentleness meant safety. She did not run. She walked into the rain like someone who had already buried what she was leaving behind. Luca turned from the screen and went to Chiara. She had not left the guest suite. Of course she had not. Chiara Ferretti understood theatre. She was beautiful in a calculated way, dark hair arranged over one shoulder, lips painted, though morning had barely begun. She waited in a silk robe Sofia had once said looked like spilled wine. "Luca," she began, placing a tremor in his name. He closed the door behind him. "What did she see?" Chiara's expression fluttered. "I don't know what you mean." His silence did more than shouting could have done. Men who screamed gave the world something to resist. Luca gave nothing. He stood there, 6 feet 2 inches of controlled violence, olive skin pale with fury, eyes black with grief. "You came to my room," he said. "You gave me wine. You were hurt, you were angry, you needed someone. I needed the woman I was going to marry." A flash of hatred ruined the prettiness of her face. "She never understood you. She made you weak. She made me human." Chiara's hand trembled at her throat. "I loved you first. You drugged me." Her mouth opened and closed, one answer too slow. Luca looked away from her, as if even hatred required more intimacy than she deserved. "You are alive because she loved you once." "Luca, please." "No." His voice was very soft. That frightened her more. "You do not say my name again. You do not speak hers. You do not go near anyone who carries the Mancini name. By sunset you will be gone from this house, this city, and every circle in which I have influence. If I hear that you have tried to reach her, I will erase every protection your father ever bought." "She left you," Chiara whispered. I stayed. For the first time, Luca smiled. It was a terrible thing to see. "You no longer exist to me." Then he walked out and left her with a silence that had no drawback. The search became the shape of his life. Ports, clinics, pawn shops, hotels that took cash. Women with dark hair, false passports, false sightings. A nurse in Nice who swore she had seen her. A ferry worker in Split who had not. A bank withdrawal in Valencia that turned out to belong to a widow with the same initials. Luca sent money into alleys, favors into government offices, threats into rooms where threats usually came from other men. Nothing returned Sofia. During those 4 years, the Mancini empire expanded. Grief made him precise. He cut bad alliances without ceremony, took 2 transport routes along the Swiss border, and negotiated with men twice his age while imagining Sofia's face on every reflective surface. His enemies began saying he had become something without feeling. His men believed it when they saw how calm he was with traitors. Dante knew better. Dante knew because of the empty room. It was on the 2nd floor, facing east, where the morning light came in clean enough for delicate work. Before Sofia left, Luca had planned to turn it into a studio for her restoration projects. She had laughed when he told her, not because she did not want it, but because gifts from Luca often arrived like annexations. He had pretended offense. She had touched his wrist and said, "I need windows, not a kingdom." The room was never converted. The long work table stayed wrapped in canvas. Crates of pigments from Florence sat unopened beside tools she had chosen herself. Once, 3 months after she vanished, Dante found Luca sitting on the floor there at 2 a.m. with a tin of brushes open beside him. Luca held one sable brush between his fingers so gently it might have been a throat. "Then I will keep looking." 4 years passed like that, not moving on but hardening around absence. Sofia Marino lived in a town that smelled of salt, citrus peel, old stone, and wet rope. She chose the name Marino because it was common enough to vanish inside, and because the sea had been the first thing she saw after she stopped running. The town clung to the Ligurian coast in tiers of faded pink and ochre houses, shutters blistered by wind. Fishermen argued below her window every morning. Church bells marked hours she sometimes forgot to count. In summer, tourists came with careless voices. In winter, rain silvered the alleys, and the world felt narrow enough to survive. 6 weeks after leaving Luca, she found out she was pregnant in the bathroom of a pharmacy that sold lavender soap and motion sickness tablets. The test lay in her hand, while a woman outside knocked and asked if everything was all right. Sofia stared at the 2 lines until they blurred. She did not cry. Crying belonged to people who believed something could still be negotiated. She sat on the closed toilet seat for 40 minutes with one palm pressed beneath her coat, though there was nothing there yet to feel. She should have made lists. Danger against longing, money against pride, a fugitive's life against a child's right to safety. Instead, the decision arrived already made. She would keep the baby. Later she understood she had never truly chosen. The choice had opened its eyes inside her and looked back. At 12 weeks, a doctor with tired kindness told her there were 2 heartbeats. Sofia laughed once, a broken sound that frightened them both. The pregnancy was hard in a way no painting of motherhood had ever confessed. She vomited until her ribs ached. She restored damaged saints with swollen ankles and slept with a chair under the apartment door. Money thinned. Pride thinned with it. She sold the diamond earrings Luca had given her during their first year together and used the cash to pay rent through winter. Work saved her because work had no patience for despair. San Bartolomeo, the little church above the harbour, had murals damaged by damp, smoke, and neglect. Father Angelo, the elderly priest who hired her, had trembling hands and eyes that knew how not to pry. He paid poorly but consistently. When her belly grew impossible to hide, he placed a chair near the scaffolding and pretended it had always been there. Sometimes he left oranges on the altar rail. Sometimes he muttered at the saints for not helping faster. The twins came on a February morning while rain hammered the clinic roof and the sea threw itself against the harbour wall. Marco arrived first, furious and loud, his fists clenched as if prepared to accuse the world. Nico came 9 minutes later in a silence so complete Sofia's heart stopped until he opened his eyes. They were not identical. Marco had Sofia's mouth and her grandfather's stubborn chin. Nico was smaller, solemn even then, with long fingers and a gaze too focused for a newborn. Both had Luca's eyes. That was the cruelty she had not prepared for. Not hunger, not exhaustion, not learning to feed 2 infants while her body felt borrowed and emptied. It was looking down and seeing Luca twice, softened by innocence. Every day she had to choose not to turn away from the face of the man who had destroyed her. Every day she chose correctly. She named Marco for her grandfather, who had taught her how to hold a paintbrush and how to tell when a man was lying by what he did with his hands. She named Nico for no one. He simply looked like a Nico, quiet and exact, as if he had arrived with opinions. She built routines because routines were walls. Monday market, Tuesday laundry, Wednesday church accounts because Father Angelo hated numbers and precision steadied her. She took the boys to the sea when the weather allowed. Marco chased gulls with hopeless confidence. Nico collected stones and arranged them by color on the windowsill. At night, she told stories without princes, because princes had armies, castles, and too many doors. She was not happy exactly. Happiness sounded careless. But she was intact. She could make coffee while Nico leaned against her leg and Marco sang nonsense into a wooden spoon. She could stand in the church on a spring morning with gold dust on her fingers and feel, for one clean second, that the world had not taken everything. That was enough. For now. She never told the boys their father's name, not because she wanted to erase him. Erasure would have been easier if she hated him cleanly. But love had survived in her like a dangerous ember under ash, small and humiliating and impossible to put out. She hated that. She hated the nights when Marco slept with one arm thrown over his head exactly as Luca used to. The mornings when Nico stared at her with those grave, dark eyes, and she heard Luca's patience in the silence. So she said only that their father lived far away. Dante found her because of a saint's restored hand. The article was small, buried in the regional arts section of an online paper that covered festivals, municipal scandals, and church repairs. There was a photograph of the apse after restoration, Father Angelo smiling beside a woman identified as Sofia Marino. Her hair was shorter, her face was thinner, the light was poor. It did not matter. On the third night, Dante found him in the empty studio. Rain slid down the eastern window. Luca stood with his sleeves rolled, inked saints and serpents dark under lamplight, a glass in his hand he had not drunk from. "We found a container route tied to Teresi," Dante said. And I found something else." He placed the article on the covered work table. Luca looked down. Dante watched the blood leave his face. For a long time there was only rain. "Where?" Luca asked. Dante told him. Luca touched the edge of the photograph, not Sofia's face, as if paper could flinch. "How long have you known?" 3 days. The old Luca might have called that betrayal. This one looked as if he understood exactly why someone might protect Sofia from him. "Why tell me now?" Dante's mouth twisted. "Because every day you stay like this, the house gets colder." Luca folded the article with unnatural care. "Prepare the car. No convoy, no theatre. If she sees soldiers, she'll run." "She won't see me until I know how not to frighten her," Luca said, and Dante heard, for the first time in years, something that sounded like hope. Luca arrived in Liguria without the procession his name could have commanded. One rented car, Dante in another, 2 streets away. No black SUVs, no visible guards, no men with earpieces pretending to admire the sea. The town did not know a king of northern shadows had entered it. It knew only that the laundry snapped between buildings and an unfamiliar man sat too long in a parked car near the harbor with both hands flat on the steering wheel. For 2 days, Luca watched. He hated himself for it, but he watched because approaching Sofia without knowing her life would be another violence. She had built something here. He saw it in the way the baker leaned out to complain about Marco stealing bread and handed him another piece. He saw it in the old woman who tried to touch Nico's hair and withdrew laughing after receiving his severe stare. He saw Father Angelo walk beside Sofia down the church steps, waving his cane as if commanding an army. No one looked afraid of her. No one looked bought. The boys were the center of every calculation and the ruin of every defense. He saw them first at the market. Marco was arguing with a fishmonger about whether octopuses had opinions. Nico stood beside Sofia with one hand hooked in her skirt, his gaze moving across faces, exits, shadows. Luca recognized that look with a pain so sharp he had to close his eyes. The child had never met him and still carried his vigilance. Marco turned suddenly and ran after a rolling orange. He tripped on uneven cobblestones and hit the ground hard enough that Luca's body moved before his mind permitted it. He opened the car door. Across the street, Sofia was already there, kneeling, gathering Marco into her arms before the boy had decided whether to cry. He cried because he had an audience. "It's broken," Marco declared, holding up his scraped palm. Sofia kissed the heel of it. "Tragic. We may need to replace the whole hand." "With a hook?" "Only if you promise not to use it on your brother." Nico crouched beside them. "It is not broken." "You don't know everything," Marco said. "I know that." Sofia laughed. The sound reached Luca through the cracked window and entered him like a blade warmed by the sun. He had heard men beg, watched enemies die, listened to deals collapse and fortunes change hands. Nothing had undone him like Sofia laughing with their children in a marketplace where he had no right to stand. He counted, though, there was no need. 4 years. Marco's chin, Nico's eyes. Sofia's hand resting on the back of Nico's head when a stranger passed too close. Luca sat in the car and pressed his palms harder against the wheel until Fede and Forza went white across his knuckles. Faith, strength, words he had mistaken for possessions. Now they sounded like demands he had failed to meet. On the second evening, he saw Sofia alone. The church sat in blue dusk, its stone still holding the day's warmth. Sofia came out through the side door with a cloth bag over one shoulder, her hair pinned loosely, gold dust caught at her cuff. She locked the door and paused as if the air had changed. Luca stepped from beneath the cypress at the edge of the courtyard. Sofia. Her name had lived in him for 4 years. Nothing prepared him for saying it to her face. She turned. Shock opened her expression first, clean and human. Then rage. Then grief. Last came stillness. She became the woman from the security footage again, the one who could close a door gently on the end of her life. Luca did not move closer. Every instinct in him wanted to cross the courtyard and prove she was not another ghost made of exhaustion. He locked his body where it stood. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "No," he answered. "I shouldn't." That unsettled her more than any defense would have. "How did you find me?" Dante found the article about the church. A flicker. Calculation, not fear. "Does anyone else know?" "No one who would move without my permission. That is not as comforting as you think." "I know." Silence stretched. Somewhere below, a child shouted, and both of them turned toward the sound by instinct. Sofia noticed. Her jaw hardened. "You saw them?" "Yes." Her hand closed around the strap of her bag. "Then ask what you came to ask." He looked at the scratches near the church lock, at the gold dust on her sleeve. Anywhere but at the anger he had earned until he could speak without taking something from her. "I know what you saw," he said. "I know there is nothing I can say that makes it smaller, but I need you to tell me about them." For a moment he thought she might strike him. He would have accepted it. Instead she laughed once without humor and descended 1 step. "You need?" she said. "That is still your first language." The words entered cleanly because they were true. "Tell me what you allow me to know," he said. Then, "They are 4. Marco is loud enough for 3 children and affectionate enough for 5. Nico is quiet until he decides the room has earned his opinion. Marco likes figs, wooden swords, and inventing laws he immediately breaks. Nico likes stones, old keys, and correcting priests. They both hate peas. Marco lies badly. Nico lies rarely, but well. They ask about you sometimes. I tell them their father lives far away." Luca took each fact like punishment and gift braided together. "Their names are Marco and Nico. Are they healthy?" "Yes." "Happy?" Her face changed, the smallest crack. "They are loved." The answer did what she meant it to do. It told him happiness had not been his to ask about. He nodded. "Thank you." Do not thank me. Sofia. No. She came down the final step, close enough that he could see the faint exhaustion around her eyes and the strength in her shoulders. You do not get to say my name like it belongs in your mouth. I found out 6 weeks after I left, she said, in a pharmacy bathroom that smelled like bleach and lavender soap. I sat there with the test in my hand and tried to remember how to breathe. At 12 weeks they told me there were 2 heartbeats. I did not have anyone to call. Do you understand that? Not one person I could call without risking being found by the man whose bed I had just seen my sister in. Luca's hands lowered at his sides. The tremor began in his fingers. He closed them into fists, not to hide from her, but to keep himself from reaching. The pregnancy was hard, she continued. Not poetic hard. I was sick every day. I worked on scaffolding until Father Angelo threatened to tie me to a chair. I sold jewelry you gave me to pay rent. When the boys were born, Marco screamed at the world, and Nico did not make a sound for long enough that I thought I had lost him before I knew him. I named them alone. I brought them home alone. I learned how to feed 2 babies alone. When they were feverish, I stayed awake with one hand on each of them because I was afraid to sleep and miss one of them stopping. Each sentence was controlled. That made it worse. She was not performing pain. She was placing evidence between them. And every day, she said, her voice thinning only once, I looked at your eyes in their faces. Twice. I loved them anyway. I loved them because of themselves and in spite of you, and because some ruined part of me still remembered loving you. Do you know what that cost? I am sorry, he said. It was too small. He knew that before it left his mouth, but it was also the only true thing he had that did not try to purchase relief. I am sorry in a way I do not know how to carry. Sofia looked away. Her throat moved. Sorry is not a currency I accept anymore. I am not offering currency. What are you offering? Truth. Her eyes returned to him. I was drugged, he said. That is not an excuse. I should have known what Chiara was capable of. I should have sent her away long before that night. I should have protected the place you slept so thoroughly that no one could turn it into a weapon. I failed before the door ever opened. Sofia's face did not change, but the air around her did. I searched for you, he continued. Every day, across 5 countries. I turned over ports, clinics, banks, names. I kept the room I was making for your work untouched because changing it felt like admitting you were not coming home. I became very good at everything except living. That is my guilt, not your problem. What happened to Chiara? She is gone from my life. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters here. I did not kill her, if that is what you are asking. I wanted to. You would have hated that, even after everything. What do you want? She asked. He had prepared 100 answers and discarded them all. He chose the one that frightened him most because it held no power. To be their father, he said. Nothing more than you allow. Nothing less than everything I failed to be for you. I am not asking you to come back, he added. That was what reached her. Not forgiveness, not apology, not even the truth about Chiara. The absence of a claim. Luca saw the first layer of her armor shift. Not fall, but shift enough for breath to enter. If I let you meet them, it is because they deserve truth, not because you deserve anything. Tomorrow, she said. At the church. Public place. Dante can come if he stays outside. No weapons visible, no men. There will be protection you don't see. Of course there will. I won't lie to you. Start there, she said, and walked away before he could say her name again. The first meeting did not resemble anything Luca had imagined. He arrived at San Bartolomeo at 10 in the morning, wearing no suit jacket, no visible weapon, and the plain black shirt Dante claimed made him look less like a funeral. Dante waited by the gate with his arms crossed, pretending not to study every window. Father Angelo sat on a bench near the church door, because Sofia had asked him to be present, and because he had clearly decided Luca was a problem best evaluated in sunlight. The boys came late because Marco had refused socks on legal grounds. "I don't need them," he announced as Sofia guided him into the courtyard. "Feet are already skin." Marco accepted this and turned to Luca. Nico stood half behind Sofia, one hand gathered in her skirt, his gaze fixed on Luca's face with unnerving precision. Sofia knelt between them. She did not sweeten the moment, and Luca loved and suffered for that. "This is Luca," she said. "He is your father." Marco blinked. "The faraway one." "Yes. You are not far away." "Not today," Luca said. Marco considered this and approached at a run. Stopping so close, Luca had to fight every instinct not to reach. The child tilted his head back. "You are very tall, I have been told. Can you lift heavy things?" "Some." "Can you lift me?" "Marco," Sofia warned. Luca looked at her. She gave the smallest nod, more terror than permission. He crouched first, bringing himself closer to Marco's height. Every man in his world had been taught never to make himself smaller. Marco put both hands on Luca's shoulders, saw the letters across his knuckles, and poked them. "What does that say?" "Faith," Luca said, flexing one hand. "And strength." "Do they come off?" "No." "Did you draw on yourself forever?" "Yes." "Mama says not to draw on skin." "Your mother is right. You did it anyway." "I have made many mistakes." Marco climbed into his arms without further negotiation. For 1 second, Luca forgot how to hold anything. The boy was warm, solid, smelling of soap, bread, and sun-warmed hair. His hand pressed against the tattoo on Luca's neck. Luca closed his eyes. When he opened them, Sofia was looking away, but her mouth trembled. For 20 minutes, Nico stayed in the church doorway, not hiding, observing. Luca sat on the ground because Marco had discovered that his forearms made excellent roads for wooden horses. He answered every question Marco asked, including whether he owned a castle, whether he had fought a shark, and whether he liked peas. When Luca said no to peas, Marco shouted, "Mama, he is correct!" as if paternity had been legally established. Nico finally stepped forward, holding a small blue stone. Luca met the boy's gaze. "Yes." "Then why did Mama have to sell her earrings?" Dante looked at the sky. Father Angelo closed his eyes briefly. Luca understood that Nico's questions were not rudeness. They were doors with locks. "Because I failed her," Luca said, "and because she was protecting you." Nico's fingers tightened around the stone. "Why didn't you come before?" "Because your mother needed to be somewhere safe, and I was the reason she did not feel safe." Luca looked at Sofia across the courtyard. "I'm trying to be." Nico considered this. Then he placed the blue stone on Luca's knee. "This is not for keeping. It is for looking." He did not fully understand, but he knew a test when he was granted one. After that, the days arranged themselves around boundaries. Luca came in the mornings and left when Sofia told him to. He brought no extravagant gifts after Sofia looked at the polished toys from Milan and said, "They need a father, not a patron." The next day he came with oranges, a repaired hinge for the church cupboard, and a willingness to be used as a climbing structure. Marco found this acceptable. Nico inspected the hinge. Sofia watched with caution, so disciplined it looked like calm. Luca saw how she kept exits in mind, how she positioned herself between the boys and the street, how she carried a knife hidden in the seam of her market bag. He did not insult her by mentioning it. Every time he left without asking for more, something in her eased by a fraction. Fractions became the only arithmetic that mattered. Sofia noticed the danger before anyone touched her. Two men near the olive stall watched too little and too much. They looked at the boys once, then deliberately away. One had hands too clean for the workman's jacket he wore. The other smiled at Marco with no warmth. Sofia's body understood before her mind named it. She shifted the market bag to her left arm and took Nico's hand. "Marco," she said lightly, "race me to Signora Belli's door." Marco, who believed all invitations were competitions, launched himself forward. Nico looked up at her face and did not ask why. That obedience frightened her more than panic would have. The clean-handed man moved. Sofia angled her body, calculating distance, crowd, stone steps, the knife in her bag, Marco already halfway to the bakery. She drew breath to shout his name. A hand closed around the man's wrist before he reached her. The stranger beside him found Dante's pistol pressed discreetly beneath his ribs. "Walk," Dante said in a conversational tone. The man with the trapped wrist tried to twist free. The person holding him was one of Luca's hidden guards, a woman Sofia had seen twice pretending to buy tomatoes. The guard smiled without kindness and bent his wrist until his knees softened. The market went silent. Someone dropped a bag of lemons. Marco turned at the bakery door, victory bright on his face until he saw his mother's expression. Luca arrived in less than 3 minutes, which meant he had been running. Sofia had never seen him run in public. He appeared above the market steps with his collar open, eyes sweeping once over Marco, Nico, Sofia, guards, exits, windows. Only when he saw the boys untouched did something human return to his face. Luca's gaze went to the alley where his men had taken the attackers. The air around him changed. It was like watching a door close on every warm thing he had tried to become. Sofia saw it and understood the world she had spent 4 years refusing to name had found her anyway. Hiding had been a room with paper walls. Her sons were not safer because she had given them a false surname and a view of the sea. They were only undefended in a quieter place. She placed one hand on Marco's shoulder and one on Nico's head. Her voice was steady because it had to be. "Not where they can hear." He held her gaze, and whatever he had intended for the men in the alley was postponed by the force of her demand. Dante. That night, Sofia did not sleep. The boys did eventually. Marco curled around a wooden horse, exhausted by fear he did not yet know how to admit. Nico lay awake longer, rigid under the blanket, until Sofia sat beside him and placed her hand on his back. Sofia looked toward the window where the town lights blurred in the glass. Because of many things. In the morning, she asked Luca to come to the church alone. He stood beneath the damaged mural of St. Michael while she faced him with paint still under one fingernail. "I can't stay here," she said. "No. I cannot run either." "No. So there are only ugly choices." "Yes." She appreciated that he did not insult her by pretending otherwise. "If I return to the estate, it is not for you." "I know. It is for the boys' safety, for a real life that is not made from borrowed names and checking mirrors." "Yes. I will have my own room." "Of course. Not the old one." "No. The boys sleep where I choose. I choose their teachers, their doctors who comes near them. No one tells them what they are meant to inherit without my permission." "Agreed. You do not touch me unless I ask you to." His jaw tightened, not in anger but in shame. "Never. If I leave, you do not stop me." This one cost him. His entire life had been built on holding territory. But he nodded. "I will protect you leaving if that day comes." She had prepared for persuasion, the old Luca who could turn a room with certainty. His acceptance left her with nothing to push against. "What do you want in return?" "To come home at night and know they are under a roof I can defend," he said. "To see them at breakfast if you allow it. To learn what they need before they have to ask twice. To To be near enough that when I fail, you can tell me before the failure becomes a wound." Sofia looked up at the damaged saint. "You think that is enough?" "No." His voice roughened. "I think it is a beginning I do not deserve." She did not forgive him, but she believed, unwillingly, that he was trying. "We leave in 2 days," she said. The Mancini estate appeared at dusk behind iron gates and cypress trees, exactly as she remembered, and not at all the same. 4 years ago she had left through the kitchen door with 1 bag and a heart turned to ash. Now she returned with 2 sleeping children, conditions still forming in her mouth, and a man beside her, who looked at the gates as if he feared them too. No staff lined the entrance. She noticed. Luca had listened. Only Amelia, the housekeeper, waited inside, older now, eyes wet but disciplined. Nico looked around the foyer, taking in cameras, exits, the guards beyond the glass doors. "It's too big." Sofia crouched beside him. "We will make our part smaller." Luca heard that and acted on it. By morning, the West Wing had become not a gilded prison, but a home inside a fortress. The boys' rooms were across from Sofia's. Luca's room was at the far end of the corridor, close enough for safety, far enough for respect. The old shared bedroom stayed closed. Sofia did not ask what had become of the bed. Luca did not tell her it had been burned 4 years ago. Their life under one roof began without romance. It began with toothbrushes, night terrors, security briefings Sofia insisted on attending, and Marco getting lost on the way to breakfast because he followed a cat that did not belong to them. It began with Nico refusing to eat anything prepared by a kitchen he had not inspected. Luca took him to meet the cook. Nico asked where the knives were kept. The cook looked at Luca for guidance. Luca learned fatherhood badly at first, then honestly. He offered solutions when comfort was required. He stood too stiffly when the boys cried. He underestimated the importance of specific cups. Marco forgave everything quickly if lifted high enough. Nico did not forgive so much as update his records. At night, Sofia sometimes passed Luca's office and saw him through the open door. He no longer worked like a man trying to become stone. He took calls with one eye on the hallway, listening for small feet. Once, Nico appeared silently in the doorway with a nightmare he refused to name. Luca did not ask what was wrong. He only held out a hand. Nico stared at it for almost a minute. Then he crossed the room and climbed into Luca's lap. The stillness that came over Luca was devastating. He did not breathe properly. He looked at Sofia, who had stopped in the hall, and she saw terror in him, pure and unguarded. Not fear of enemies, fear of moving too quickly and losing the weight of his son. Nico tucked his head beneath Luca's chin, as if he had always known the place existed. Luca's hand came down on his back with a care that made Sofia turn away. The threat from Teresi did not vanish. It was handled in rooms Sofia did not enter, and through negotiations she did not ask to hear in detail. But Luca did not hide the existence of danger from her. When routes changed, she knew why. When guards rotated, she knew their names. Some part of her hated that her life required such knowledge. Another part recognized the dignity of being told the truth. Luca never used danger as leverage. He never said, "See, you need me." The absence of those words mattered more than any apology. Instead, he showed up. The turn came quietly. It was late June. The boys had worn themselves out in the garden with an elaborate war involving pine cones, spoons, and a peace treaty Marco violated within 6 minutes. Nico had fallen asleep at dinner with his cheek in his hand. Marco insisted he was not tired, then slumped sideways against Dante, who looked personally offended and did not move until the child was carried upstairs. When the boys slept, Sofia walked without deciding to the terrace overlooking the dark garden. Luca was there, jacket off, forearms braced on the stone rail. The night smelled of jasmine and coming rain. For once no phone was in his hand, He sensed her before she spoke, and straightened, giving her space. "I can leave." "Don't." The word surprised them both. They stood with several feet between them. The garden lights glowed along the paths. Somewhere a fountain moved water over stone. "I don't know how to forgive you," Sofia said. "I am not asking you to forgive me." "Then what are you asking?" "To let me stay." She folded her arms, not from cold. "What is the difference?" "Forgiveness is for you to reach." He turned his hands palm up on the railing, knuckle letters visible in the terrace light. "Staying is for me to earn." She looked at those hands. She knew what they had done. She knew what they could do. She also knew how they had trembled the first time Marco climbed into his arms, how still they had gone around Nico, how they set forks badly and repaired toys, and never reached for her without permission. "You have been different," she said. "I have been trying." "I know." The silence after that was not empty. It held 4 years of grief, 2 sleeping children, a church by the sea, a ring on a counter, a woman walking through rain, a man sitting on the floor of an unfinished studio. It held the possibility that love might not return as fire. It might return as a hand extended slowly enough to refuse. Sofia took 1 step toward him. Luca did not move. That almost undid her. The waiting, the discipline of it. She took another step, then another, until she was close enough to see the small scar near his eyebrow, the one she used to touch when he woke from bad dreams and pretended he had not been dreaming. She placed her hand on his forearm, over the inked serpent, over warmth and muscle and restraint. His breath left him in one quiet, shattered sound, as if he had been holding it since the night she walked away. "Sofia," he whispered. This time she let him say it. She did not kiss him that night. That would have been too simple, too easy for the body to mistake for repair. She only stood beside him with her hand on his arm until the first rain began to fall over the garden. He did not cover her hand with his. He let her decide when to withdraw. When she did, he looked at the place her fingers had been as if it were a wound healing. After that, they moved differently. Not together, not yet, but no longer like strangers negotiating a border. Sofia began joining Luca and the boys at breakfast. At first she claimed it was because Marco spilled less when watched, then because Nico asked better questions with an audience. Then she stopped explaining. Luca never looked victorious. She would have punished him for that. He looked grateful in small, inconvenient ways, like pausing before pouring her coffee to remember how much milk she took now instead of how much she had taken before. The first kiss came in the kitchen at midnight 3 weeks later. It began with Marco's fever, mild but dramatic. He woke flushed and miserable, convinced his blanket had betrayed him. Sofia and Luca spent 2 hours cooling his forehead, measuring medicine, and negotiating with a child who believed thermometers were insults. Nico woke too and stood in the doorway, pretending not to be worried. Luca carried both boys back to bed when it was over, one against each shoulder, moving with the careful strength of a man carrying holy things. In the kitchen afterward, Sofia washed the medicine spoon. Her hands shook from exhaustion. Luca noticed, of course. He took a towel and dried the spoon because it was the only help she had not refused. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I will." Liar. Only strategically. She smiled despite herself. He saw it and became very still, as if her smile were something wild that might startle. That tenderness, that absurd fear of frightening joy, opened a door she had been leaning against for weeks. She stepped close. "You can touch me now." His eyes searched hers. "Are you sure?" "No," she said honestly. "But I want you to." He raised one hand slowly enough that she could stop it at any point. His fingers touched her cheek first, barely, then with more certainty when she leaned into him. His palm was warm, roughened by old scars. She closed her eyes and felt grief move through her, not leaving, but making room. The kiss was careful. That was what made it unbearable. Luca Mancini, who had taken territories and bent powerful men to his will, kissed her like permission was the most precious thing he had ever been granted. Sofia's hand curled in the front of his shirt. He made a sound against her mouth, not hunger only, though hunger was there, but relief so deep it hurt to hear. She broke the kiss first and rested her forehead against his chest. His heart was racing. "This doesn't fix it," she said. "No. I might hate you tomorrow. I will be here tomorrow." She laughed softly into his shirt. "That is not the romantic answer. It is the true one." She stayed there because truth, for once, felt warmer than romance. Months gathered. Marco grew taller and more theatrical. He developed a passion for declaring family meetings, which mostly involved complaints about vegetables and proposals for later bedtime. Nico learned to read early and immediately became insufferable about labels. He followed Luca through the estate with a small notebook, asking questions about security cameras, business, and whether loyalty was different from obedience. Luca answered more than Sofia expected and less than Nico wanted, which became their natural balance. The first time Nico chose Luca without necessity came in autumn. They were in the garden, leaves caught in wet grass, the sky low and silver. Marco was attempting to teach a cat to fetch. Sofia sat on a bench with restoration sketches in her lap. Luca stood near the fountain speaking quietly with Dante. Nico approached carrying a wooden puzzle Luca had carved badly and repaired worse. "I have decided," Nico announced. Everyone turned. Luca ended the conversation mid-sentence. "About what?" Nico stood straight, solemn as a judge issuing a ruling. "I have decided to trust you." The garden went silent. Marco looked up from the offended cat. "I already did that." "Your standards are lower," Nico said. "They are not." "You trusted a pigeon last week?" It looked honest. Luca did not laugh. He could not. His face changed in a way Sofia had never seen, not collapsing, not breaking, but opening under pressure from within. He lowered himself to Nico's height. "Thank you," he said, and the words were rough. Nico frowned. "You look upset." "I am not upset. You look it." Dante turned away first. Sofia followed a second later, pressing her fingers to her mouth, because the expression on Luca's face was too private and too beautiful to watch directly. But Nico watched, because Nico did not yet know that mercy sometimes meant looking away. Luca held out his hand. "May I hug you?" Nico considered. Briefly. The hug was not brief. Nico allowed it anyway. That night, Sofia found Luca in the boys' room after they had fallen asleep. He sat in the chair between their beds, a picture book open on his chest, Marco's wooden sword across his lap, Nico's blue stone on the small table beside him. His head had fallen back. He was asleep, face softened, the tattoo on his neck half hidden by shadow. Faith and strength rested open on the arms of the chair. Sofia stood in the doorway for a long time. This was not the man behind the bedroom door. It did not erase that man. Nothing erased him. But this man existed too, and denying that would be its own lie. Love, she had learned, was not a clean room where grief could not enter. It was a house with locked doors, broken windows, repaired hinges, and people choosing daily not to abandon it. She crossed the room and lifted the book from his chest. Luca woke instantly, one hand catching her wrist before he recognized her. The grip vanished at once. "Sorry," he whispered. "Reflex. Still sorry." She placed the book on the table. Marco muttered in his sleep. Nico did not wake. Sofia leaned down and kissed Luca's forehead. He closed his eyes. "Come to bed," she said. His gaze lifted to hers, full of questions he did not ask because he had learned that some invitations died under the weight of being examined. "Your room," he said quietly. "Our room," she answered, and felt the words settle not as surrender but as choice. One summer evening, almost a year after Luca found them, the four of them gathered in the kitchen because rain had cancelled Marco's very important garden expedition, and Nico had declared the library too dusty for human survival. Sofia rolled past her at the marble counter. Marco stood on a stool beside her, dusted with flour from chin to hair, talking continuously about a dragon who wanted to become a lawyer. Nico sat at the table arranging basil leaves by size before permitting them into the bowl. Luca leaned against the counter with his sleeves rolled, trying to shape dough under Marco's aggressive instruction. "No, Papa," Marco said, gentle, like it is a tiny sleeping animal. Luca looked at the mangled dough in his hands. "This animal has suffered." Marco began singing a song about tragic pasta. Nico corrected the rhyme scheme. Luca watched them both with an expression he still tried, unsuccessfully, to hide. Sofia saw it and leaned her hip against the counter. Outside, rain moved softly over the garden. Inside, flour drifted in the warm light like dust from a painting being restored. Luca's hand found hers beneath the edge of the counter. He did not take it. He placed his fingers nearby, waiting. Even now, always that choice. Sofia looked at him, at the script on his neck, the saints and serpents on his forearms, the faith and strength across his knuckles dusted white with flour. She thought of a closed door, a ring on stone, a bathroom in a coastal pharmacy, 2 heartbeats, a blue stone, a market, a terrace in rain. She thought of all the ways love could be ruined by possession and remade by patience. She slid her fingers through his. Sofia laughed before she could stop herself, a full, bright sound that filled the kitchen and startled even her. Luca looked at her as if the sound had opened the roof and let sky in. The boys began arguing about whether pasta had emotions. Rain tapped the windows. Somewhere in the house, Dante shouted that if the dragon lawyer needed representation, he charged double. To a stranger, it would have looked like nothing. A woman at a counter, a man with flour on his hands, 2 children making too much noise in a kitchen warm with steam and rainlight. No vows, no grand victory, no proof that pain had never happened. But Sofia knew better. So did Luca. This was the miracle, not the kind sung about in churches or promised in stories by people who had never had to rebuild from ash. The miracle was ordinary, and therefore harder won. It was Marco pressing flour onto Luca's tattooed knuckles because he said the letters looked hungry. It was Nico allowing his basil leaves to be imperfectly arranged because he was laughing too much to fix them. It was Luca squeezing Sofia's hand once, not to hold her in place, but to answer the choice she had made. It was Sofia staying, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because this time, when she looked around the room, every door was open.